Hi, Carissa with Southern Homegrown again. In today's video, I want to talk a little bit more and touch on labor and to tell the difference between that practice labor and that for real deal labor. So with practice labor, as we talked about, the contractions are only tightening portions of the uterus. So it rarely has back pressure. It's just different spots of the uterus. Whereas with real labor, it's usually felt over the whole uterus and it may be felt in the back as well. So then you also, these practice contractions usually last 15 to 45 seconds. You know, they're kind of sporadic. Whereas the real deal, you know, they're going to get longer in duration and at least 60 seconds long, you know, at least a minute, you know, 4-1-1, you know, 4 minutes apart, you know, a minute long for an hour. But in some people, though, you may want to go sooner than that. But, you know, that's what they generally say. So, you know, and with practice labor, you know, they may not be getting close together. They may be, like we said, spaced out and sporadic. Whereas with the real deal, they're going to be close together. They're going to start getting close together and they're going to get timable. So with practice labor, they're not really going to increase in intensity. I mean, they may not be the greatest in the world, but, you know, they're not going to increase intensity. Whereas with real labor, they're going to get into a regular pattern and they're going to start getting progressively stronger, you know, where eventually you get to where you can't really talk through them. They're going to be, with the practice labor, they're going to be like irregular rhythms. You know, it's not really real labor. They're going to start to eventually get into a pattern. And with the, you know, warm-up labor, they're going to change in activity or position will hold them off, you know, whereas with actual labor, it doesn't matter if you change positions, if you drink water, it doesn't matter what you do, these things are coming. So, and walking doesn't make these contractions stronger during practice labor, whereas during the real deal, walking will help facilitate labor if that's the real deal, and it's going to help the contractions get stronger, regular, timeable, and it's going to get things going. Whereas walking during practice labor, it's just going to kind of, they'll ease off eventually. So 9 ways to progress in labor. The first is the cervix is going to move forward. So in the weeks before labor, the cervix is going to be high and kind of posterior, which posterior means pointing to your back. So where's my cervix? Hold on. There we go. This is way small, but you know, it's going to be posterior and pointing toward the back. It's gradually going to move down and forward into an anterior position, which would be facing forward so the baby can come out. Number 2, the cervix will ripen and soften. So as we talked about that effacement, that dilation and things, the cervix is usually firm and it feels kind of like the tip of your nose. So if you were to check your cervix, you know, before, it's going to kind of feel like the tip of your nose. But once ripening has occurred, the cervix will begin to change. So you're going to start feeling these changes. The cervix passively is going to thin, it's going to stretch out, it's going to open up like we talked in the previous videos. For some women, ripening may begin weeks before they actually go into labor. While others may start just a few days before labor, just a few hours, you know, it may go relatively quick. It just depends on the person. Number 3, the third way to progress in labor is the cervix will efface, it will thin, and it will shorten. So for first-time moms, as we talked about before, you know, a substantial degree of this effacement is going to happen before time. You know, this is going to be where these Braxton Hicks, all this other stuff comes into effect as your body starts to get ready and gear up for this marathon. So, and then sequential pregnancies where you've had babies before, the effacement and the dilation, like we said, it usually occurs about all at the same time, wham bam. You know, because your body's done this before. Effacement can be determined during a vaginal exam, and it can be measured in 1 of 2 ways, as a percentage or as centimeters. Or with some midwives, you know, they prefer just to kind of watch you and see. They don't do vaginal exams because you can really tell as you're progressing as far as how you're progressing in labor as to where you're at in these different stages. So a skilled midwife will be able to tell without actually doing a vaginal exam. So number 4, the cervix dilates and opens. That is that dilation that we talked about, the openness here. And although the cervix usually dilates some before labor, maybe 1 to 2 centimeters, for first time moms ahead of time, and can as much as 4, for sequential births, whatever, you know what I'm saying. Most dilation, will relatively take place during labor, the actual process. And it's estimated, like we said, it can be estimated during a vaginal exam, or a skilled midwife that has experience can tell by the signposts and the things that you're presenting during labor as to where you are in this. And a vaginal exam may later on be required, but most of the time they can tell by just the way things are going along. Number 5, the 5th way to progress in labor. The baby's head rotates and molds to fit through the pelvis, like we were talking about earlier. Your baby's head will rotate as it goes through the pelvis to find the best fit. We talked about that as we moved the baby around and talked about those fontanelles and how they're not fused and they will move. So as the head molds to your pelvis bones are going to widen. Think into that hormone called relaxin. And we'll talk about that again in a little bit, because relaxin will help all those muscles and all those things in your pelvis and everywhere just kind of relax during pregnancy in order to accommodate the baby's head. Then number 6, and the 6th way to progress in labor is the baby descends. And this is where we were talking about our stations. This is measured by the stations, as I said. The negative stations, like -2, means the head's kind of still up, floating above those ischial spines, like we were talking about, +2 and things, it's up there. And then 0 stations means the head's settled into the pelvis well, and we're starting to descend, we're getting there. And the positive stations, the +1, means the baby's head is moving past the ischial spines and is progressing towards the vaginal opening. So we are getting there, people. And, usually the first 4 steps are well underway before, the woman comes in. And these positive signs of labor, you're usually able to kind of tell. So, and you may be like, well, when do I need to call the midwife, or when do I need to go to the birth center or the hospital? That's kind of up to you, but generally you would want to wait until you get further along into labor before you would go. As they say, the rule was 4-1-1, 4 minutes apart, lasting 1 minute for over an hour. But not just that. It depends on with different moms. You may need to go before then, how far you live away, or how fast your labors are, or you just kind of have to listen to your body and just kind of know from there as far as what you're comfortable with. And you can always discuss this with your care provider if you want a little more information or detail on it, to be able to know and feel comfortable with that decision. You'll have possible signs of labor. You could have a low vague backache, kind of nagging, lower cramps in your lower abdomen. You'll have soft, slow bowel movements. You'll have these for a few hours, and it may go along with like intestinal cramps and things. It may be related to the circulating of the prostaglandins. I will get it out in a minute. Prostaglandins and the ripening of the cervix may cause some of these other symptoms. You may get that nesting urge at some point, before labor, that burst of energy that comes. They talk about nesting. That may be a sign that it's fixing to come. You may have that bloody show they talk about as your cervix starts to ripen and starts to dilate. That plug that was holding everything in and all, it's called a mucus plug. You may lose that. It may be blood tinged, and you may never even see it, So like I said, everybody's different. You may have that gush of fluids, or you may have that leak of fluids from the amniotic, the amniotic fluids leaking. You know, you'll have those progressive contractions, very painful. You'll have that gush of fluid eventually, and that may not even happen till right before the baby's born. And the cervix dilating, as we talked about. So yeah, that's just a quick recap. The progression of labor and kind of some of the things that'll happen before you go into labor or during labor. Way to tell, like you said, the warm-up labor from the actual labor. So anyway, if you have any questions, you know, info at Southern Homegrown or southernhomegrown.com. Shoot us a quick email and we're there for support. So have a great day. Thanks.